have finally brought something. And joining me now is the Joint Secretary of the Building Bridges Task Force, Paul Mwangi. Paul, welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much.
You're smiling much more already than the last time I hosted you.
I am happier now.
Right, you must feel a sigh of relief, I suppose, in some ways. What can Kenyans expect beginning tomorrow at the Bomas of Kenya and in the months to come?
The purpose of tomorrow is to unveil the proposals to members of the public. And what will happen from there is that we will start issuing the report to people, either in terms of hard copies, as soft copies in various forums. We're also going to start a process of civic education, beginning at least to introduce to the people the things that are in the report. Within that time, we then are waiting for the principals to at least formulate to come up with the formations that will be necessary as we move forward. It's already shown that we will be doing this amendment of the Constitution through popular initiative. So they have to decide on who are going to be the promoters of this initiative, and then they have to lay out the processes that we have to follow.
Right, and we'll get into all that in detail. But first, overall, how do you rate public response to the document so far?
So far, quite encouraging, actually, with the kind of what we had anticipated. If you followed the kind of criticism that had been there previously, one anticipated that there were going to be some more severe criticism than what we have received. But I think largely, at least so far, it's very, very positive, the kind of response that we have gotten.
Yet, you know, the usual things happen. In the few days since the report was launched, there have been now claims that one camp or the other is circulating a fake document. I've even been asked if the document on your website is the real BBI. Are you concerned at all about, you know, this sort of, you know, funny little schemes that happen ordinarily, of course, in politics, and that there might be a fake draft out there if the draft on your website is the actual draft?
You know, no, I don't think there is an institution that has been hit by fake news like BBI ever since we started in 2018. And our report is possibly the most forged. There have been too many versions. But the one that we have come up now, I have yet to see any other fake version. Largely what I see circulating is exactly what we issued in Kisii.
Okay. The first BBI draft was marred with claims that people had no access to it, to that document. And you've just mentioned there will be civic education. So tell us, how rigorous will this process be? Will it be nationwide? When will it be conducted? And how exactly will it be done?
There are many decisions that will be made beginning tomorrow. They can't be made now. I think we have to wait until the launch is done. Then we are going to start having concrete decisions made in respect of dates and times and processes, which we expect now beginning tomorrow. Okay.
But will it certainly be a much more robust process than we saw with, if you like, BBI 1, draft 1?
Yes, now it has to be, because once we begin talking about promoting the amendment of the Constitution, then the constitutional mandates already come in. You're required to do public participation. And I think the courts will be looking at how well we conduct public participation before we present the bills to the county assemblies.
All right. When do you think a referendum could possibly take place?
I wouldn't want to anticipate that, but it's very possible to do this in the very first months of next year, because by end of November, December, it's possible to have finalized with the collection of signatures and a submission of everything to IEBC.
There's a month being bandied about, February. Is that what you're referring to?
It's possible to do it in February, yes. It can be done.
Okay. Yet at the same time, this is a referendum that would be conducted with an IEBC which you want to be shown the door, with budgets thin. How possible is it to really put it all together in such a short time?
Oh, well, the delay maybe would come in IEBC, but IEBC has been able to conduct a lot of its work even with 3 commissioners. So I don't see the fact that the only three commissions being a hindrance to what we want to do.
Is it likely we could have a non-contested referendum, as many have claimed?
So far, if you look at the kind of opposition there is, it does appear that it is possible to build a lot of consensus around this document, and that even if the referendum was contested, it actually might not be as severe as we have seen in say 2010 or in 2005. We might have something that largely is going to bring more people together than what was anticipated. Right.
There's also been talk of building consensus still, and it was almost the subject of a bit of debate. I remember the former majority leader pointing it out just when the document was launched, that this should now be closed. There should be no more tinkering with the document. Do you see that possibility, and how would consensus building happen now when we already have the draft bill?
The process of building consensus, until we get to IEBC, the bill can be, it's not sealed, it can be touched. And that might be necessary for purposes of building consensus, depending on the issue that will arise. For sure, we can't reopen the bill in such a way as to bring in matters that we did not deal with when we were talking to the public. Mm-hmm. So I think any amendments that would be proposed would have to be amendments that are within the four corners of the document that we have, not amendments that can bring anything new into the document.
All right, and how would such consensus building be done?
Sorry?
How would such consensus building be done? Are you envisioning it being through the people's representatives, maybe kamkunjis and that sort of informal arrangement, or are you talking about consensus building even with every Kenyan? Or is this just for the political
I think at this point now we'll be talking of special interest groups,
right?
Maybe groups of, maybe communities or groups of politicians or political parties. Mm-hmm. Those are the ones that would bring maybe issues that they would possibly want dealt with within the document.
Okay. Is it possible to have, as I'm seeing some calling a kind of multiple choice referenda where people feel, there's some things that we clearly like, others we won't take. So, check what you like, X what you don't, and, that be that.
No, because usually when you do a bill, a legal bill, especially in the matter concerning the Constitution, there's a lot of balancing of issues. So you give people something, and on account of what you have given them, they accept possibly a provision that they possibly don't like that much. So once if you put a multiple choice, then you take away that balance. And what would happen is that people could lose the issue that made them support another issue previously. So you'd have to present it as one document and ensure that that the balance is there, and then people have to accept or reject as wholesomely.
You call it balance. Others would call it just being sneaky, You bury one little good thing under a mountain of evil and, expect the public that we would concede for one good thing. So it's not really balance, is it? It's the political class being cheeky.
No, don't forget that at the end of the day, the public is going to have to decide. The process through which we are going to have, first, you are going to have 1 million signatures. You're going to have to convince 24 county assemblies. You have to pass this through the National Assembly. You have to pass it through Senate. And then you have to pass it through the people. By the time you go through that whole process, one would believe that it's not the voice of a few anymore, but the voice of a vast majority of Kenyans. All
right. Let me take in a few audience questions which are sent in on Twitter. Tanui03 says, it's a tricky one. Assuming BBI goes through and Ruto becomes the president, which part of BBI will stop the loser from going to the streets again?
That was a tricky one, but I don't think that is what we set out to deal with in the first place.
No, but nonetheless, there is a genuine part of this question. What stops losers from feeling that, they need to contest this on the streets, which again, of course, is a democratic right, the right of protest?
That is why we are looking at the composition of IEBC Currently, the feeling always is that IEBC is captured by the state, and that once you choose commissioners, they actually literally belong to the state and do what the state's bidding. That's why we have talked about bringing in commissioners who are appointed or by political parties into the mix, so that then you have some level of confidence among political parties about the decisions that are being made. But secondly, we have also within the House given a role to losers by coming up with a leader of the opposition. As it is now, people feel that compelled to fight election results, because the results are always so damning that you are shut up for the next 5 years, despite the fact that you have been voted in by millions of people. With such roles, possibly people might not be happy about the election results, but the fact that they continue to be engaged in the governance of the country will possibly allow them to accept results.
Okay, here's another one from @Kiliambiti. You say IEBC Chairman Wafula Chebukati has cried foul over suspect, dubious and perennial overhauls of our electoral agencies. Wakili, how will you navigate the apparent quandary of the body that will conduct the referendum?
I didn't get that. I didn't understand the question.
Yeah, he's basically saying that IEBC has claimed, at least its current chairman, that there's something suspect about the continuous overhaul of the electoral body. So how will you navigate that now going into a referendum?
First, the reason we call for the overhaul is that we are changing the system, and it will not augur well to try and mix those two systems. If we are going to, for instance, to have the appointment by political parties, it's better to start from scratch. Have new people, have new appointees, and people, I think, are going to have much more confidence seeing a new group of people rather than the old ones. How they would play, I expect they are all state officers, they are all citizens of Kenya. I don't expect that they would sabotage the country simply because they are targeted. Of course, we expect them to do their work as their constitutional duty, regardless of the fact that it will affect them.
Okay. I want to take one from Ndungu Wainaina, who is the Executive Director of the International Center for Policy and Conflict. He responded to our request for questions by attaching his opinion piece. And I want to just read a little excerpt from it. And it says, quote, "Handshake and subsequently Building Bridges initiative was a closed-door private affair between Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta and Mr. Raila Odinga. It was never subject to public dialogue, agreement, and endorsement. BBI report clearly speaks to and for Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Odinga's private agreement. It does not whatsoever speak to and for the people of Kenya." How do you respond to that?
First, I don't know where Wainaina has been, because we have been all over the place, and I think you would have seen that. I also don't understand on what basis he would say it doesn't speak for the people of Kenya, because I don't think that is a judgment he himself can make. We have tried as much as possible to listen to all viewpoints. We have been, from 2018, in every county. We have met as many people as we could. We have tried to take in as many views as we can. I do not know why anybody would think that is not reflective. And if it was not, I would be happy to something to demonstrate. And in any event, as we go to the referendum, that's when we will really know whether we are representing what the people want, because the people will get to vote. If they pass it, then for sure it means what we are saying is what the people wanted.
All right. Yeah, he makes a further point, and this is just the last little excerpt I want to read for you that refers rather to the kind of legitimacy of the process. And if I may read, it says, "Any Constitution of Kenya 2010 review shall be based on participatory and transparent, comprehensive implementation, audit and production of status report," which brings the legitimacy issue that this is an attempt to overturn or overrun the current constitutional order by quote-unquote private means.
In our constitution, we do have provisions for amendment of the constitution. I have been personally previously involved in the 2014. We had Okoa Kenya. We tried to have amendments to the constitution. The party, the called Third Party Alliance, also tried, and they had their own initiative, which failed. Governors have tried previously. I have never heard any of them criticized on the basis that BBI is being criticized. The provisions for amendment of the Constitution are there for every Kenyan. And I don't think civil society is in place to decide who gets to exercise those rights and who does not get to exercise those rights. You can't give the rights and then start prefecting how people are going to, to exercise them. So it is within the right of BBI and the people who support it to make these proposals. If they are not right, the people will give their answer to that.
Right. I just want to read something to you that the committee stated in the preamble of this BBI document. Slightly long, bear with me, but it says, I quote, "It has become increasingly fashionable in some influential quarters to look down on the Kenyan tradition of working hard to mediate emerging conflicts for the sake of seeking peace and stability. You, the committee, continue to write that such efforts are sometimes derided as an, quote, uncritical embrace of a destructive status quo, with preference being for extreme actions that can push the country to the brink of escalating and possibly catastrophic conflict. We urge Kenyans to beware of unintended consequences of actions intended to destabilize the constitutional order." And I thought that was quite, a very thought-provoking quote for the committee to place right at the very top of this document. It sounds to me like the committee is very concerned of the possibility, to use your own words, of catastrophic conflict, or possibly the collapse of the country due to radical reform processes like mass protests or even revolution. Why is that a concern? Why would you put that at the very top of this document?
It speaks to why we were appointed in the first place, and it's a kind of a guiding statement, as we do everything, that the purpose of BBI was to try to get ways of avoiding these conflicts. And I think having it there was a kind of a statement showing where we are coming from and the kind of mindset that we have even as we make our proposals.
Well, but that then does say that you acknowledge that there's a significant section of the public that thinks that this process is not the right process, that it is, if I was to use your own words, the uncritical embrace of a destructive status quo, that there are people who still think that even the handshake was some sort of, I don't want to use this term, but I don't have a better one, some kind of evil, an embrace of something evil. They don't still see it as an attempt to save the nation. They believe that to save Kenya, we need a radical break from the way we have been running government. And that's certainly civil society, and you've worked closely with them. Are you concerned at all that their buy-in, their lack of buy-in into this process could cause it some legitimacy issues?
Do we expect that in every initiative, especially when you're dealing with opinions, that not everybody is going to share your opinions? And that we must accept, and that we live by. We continue every time to try to see how we can get more and more people supporting what we do. I think the people who support us, the BBI process now, is much, much bigger than when we started in 2018. We have fewer critics. There are people who, seeing especially the final document, finally convinced that a good can come from this. And I think as we go towards the end, this number will increase. But that does not mean that we shall not have critics to the end. We shall continue to have our critics to the end. Even after we are successful with this process, there are still people who will be critical about it. And I think that's natural, and we have to accept that.
All right, let me take in another audience question. At Mwaura Kabetu, you say, how does the expanded executive as recommended guarantee inclusivity? Isn't there a chance that the president, PM, DPMs, and leader of the opposition end up being members of the same region or community?
First, each of those positions are appointed by, the president appoints, but the National Assembly must confirm. So it's absolutely impossible that you're going to have people from one community and then manage to pass it through the National Assembly, because the other communities then get to have a say. But we were looking, if you look at the way government is now, government is the responsibility of one office, and nobody shares in those responsibilities. And we were trying to get a way to ensure that different roles within the executive are played by different people, and you have a wider base in which people can be involved. Rather than have a presidency that possibly only guides one community, or belongs to one community, and maybe if you count it together with the deputy, only two, we need offices where other people can play different roles, and therefore government becomes a communal kind of responsibility.
All right, we're just about to wind up, Paul, but perhaps two or so things. One of the overall criticisms that has been there is that much of this document appears administrative, is a document that could be executed. These are issues that could have been executed purely by the goodwill of the current administration without this sort of BBI process, and that political goodwill has been the problem, including with the implementation of the current constitution. So say somebody says, okay, fine, I want to vote BBI and for this new constitution. There really isn't guarantee that it would be implemented either, is there?
You know, one of the problems that we have with the current constitution is that we left too much to faith. So when problems come and people don't deliver on the constitutional mandates, you have nowhere to turn to. So we are trying to ensure that some things are locked, especially if you look at the issue, for instance, of money to the counties. Yes, currently, if the executive wanted, it can increase this amount, but there's no guarantee that that will continue. And you want to lock it so that it's no longer a question of personal discretion, but it's a question of a right that people are entitled to.
Right, but we've even seen court orders being subverted, and if it's about locking things in, the dissolution of parliament for disregard of the not more than two-thirds gender rule is something that is locked in, yet parliament sits.
The issue of the two-thirds gender rule is actually one of the mistakes that was made at the drafting of the current constitution, because it was left without any formula, and that has bogged us down for the last 10 years. And there's no way out of it. You're not going to be able to deal with the gender question unless you amend this constitution.
Well, that's not necessarily true, because Parliament has had several attempts. They just haven't agreed on it. But the heart of my question on not more than two-thirds is the fact that there was a remedy, there was a consequence that was already locked in the Constitution, that Parliament would be dissolved if it failed to do what it ought to.
That doesn't guarantee, still doesn't guarantee anything. That threat has been there for the last 10 years. Still, we don't have any solution to it. And we can't keep hoping that one, if, for instance, if we break this house as it is now, if you look at the transitional clauses, then every subsequent house will have the same time to do it. So actually it will become impossible, because once you issue the order against a new session of parliament, that new session of parliament has 5 years to do so. So every time, by the time you get to say that you can now wind up or send that parliament home for failing to pass the law, its term is already ended. Then a new session of parliament comes and you have to issue yet a new order. It will never be done, for real. All
right. Finally, one of the other major criticisms that I've seen lately, and I think that, you know, there's all sorts of text messages being attributed, you know, to people who have led the House, and really outlining the fact that what Kenya is facing right now is not a constitutional crisis, or and if there is a constitutional crisis, the crisis is the lack of implementation of the 2010 Constitution, but much more that Kenyans are looking for an economic solution, that we're facing an economic crisis, and that's what we should be focusing on rather than tinkering with the law any further before its full implementation. I mean, what is it you would say that BBI has said that really substantially addresses the economic challenges of a majority of Kenyans, and indeed the larger economy of the Kenyan Republic?
First, this statement that what we need to do is implement the current constitution. You know, it's an untrue cliche, and it's being bundled around. Nobody says exactly how you're going to achieve the things that are intended by implementation. For instance, how do you deal with the gender rule. What is there in the Constitution now that you say you are going to implement in order to get the gender rule? It's simply not there. If we are talking about, for instance, creating roles for losers of elections and so that they continue to be in governance, there's nothing in the Constitution that allows that. So we can't talk about implementation. But if we go, for instance, to the issue of the 35%, if we get more money to the counties, I think we are going to have a better standard of living for Kenyans. So we are saying that we need to start looking less at the kind of national spending that we are doing and start concentrating money, taking money to the grassroots, to the person. And if more money is getting to the people, I think we are going to have a reawakening of the economy. We're going to have a stronger economy. But so long as all that money is floating in Nairobi, what to do is that people get then tempted to just engage in big projects that don't necessarily get to the benefit the common man.
All right. Finally, Paul, so how would you urge Kenyans to take part in this process beginning tomorrow once it's made open to the public? I must confess, I put it out there on Twitter. I've been saying, everybody, let's read this document. Read it, then you'll decide. But just at least open it. And you will not believe that even those who should be encouraging others to read would say, Baba has read it for me, I don't need to read it. Still, you know. So what would you urge Kenyans to do to engage with this document, and how can they give their feedback back to you? I know you've talked about special interest groups, and those are possibly the ones who could, you know, still be involved in a little tinker here or there. How would they go about that?
Oh, well, first I would say that even the debate so far over the last few days where the report has been out has been very encouraging, and there's a lot of interest among people in understanding what is in it. And I think going forward, we anticipate that this debate will continue to be more robust. I think what we have now is what I would call now a public participation towards now the process of amending the Constitution. For one, in respect of the constitutional amendments, but then in respect of the other parts of the report, what people need to do is you get to understand what the proposals are, what the changes might come, so that you can benefit. Sometimes people don't benefit from changes because they don't even know that those changes exist. And people need to read, not just necessarily so that they can critique, but so that they can understand what are the changes that have been made. And then they would know how to take advantage of them. All
right. Well, all eyes will be at Bomas tomorrow, and of course we'll be there and we'll be bringing you that action as that report, much awaited, much contested, controversial as ever, is launched by President Uhuru Kenyatta. Thank you so much, Paul Mwangi, for speaking to us today. Paul Mwangi is the Joint Secretary of the BBI Task Force. That's been our time. Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much.
I'm Ann Kiguta. Good night. God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you.